Welcome to the California Labor Law Odyssey. My name is Tom Manzo, and I'm the president of the California Business and Industrial Alliance. We're a nonprofit organization that was formed to bring awareness to the widespread abuse of the Private Attorneys General Act, better known as PAGA. PAGA was signed into law by Governor Gray Davis back in 2004, and since has been used to extract hundreds of millions of dollars from California's businesses under the virtuous banner of employee advocacy. What people don't realize is that those millions of dollars never went to the employees. It went to the shark lawyers and to the state of California. These sharks aren't recovering lost wages. They're looking for small mistakes they can build up into a class action lawsuit. You see, attorneys' fees are protected under the Private Attorneys General Act, so they can charge whatever they want, but they only get paid if there's a settlement. Their end game is always a big settlement, never a trial. This is not justice, and we're here to expose it. So today's guest, we have Karen Anderson, and she's with Freelancers Against AB5. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. So you've done a wonderful job of really building a presence for your group. How many members do you have with Freelancers, I guess?
We have 19,000 members, and most of them are freelancers. We have a lot of small business owners and anybody who's impacted by the law. Or there's people that come in from out of state that are worried about the law spreading to their state. So it's a combination of, but mostly freelancers from all across.
Amazing number. So tell me about yourself. What do you do, and what have you been doing? And then how did you decide to start this group?
Well, I am a third generation Southern Californian. I got my start freelancing in the 90s. I'm a freelance writer, managing editor, and photographer. And over the years, I've specialized in various topics. The last 13 years has been primarily homes and interior design and travel and food and feature writing. I'm a published author of a book out. And,
wow, what's the name of the book?
It's called The Hawaii Home Book: Practical Tips for Tropical Living. I wrote it in 2006. I divide my time between Hawaii and California. I'm from South Orange County.
Yeah.
And so it's I started the freelancers group in November of last year, about a month after I read about the law, and I just couldn't even believe what was happening. And so I wanted to reach out to other freelancers outside of my own profession to see how it was affecting them and to see who might respond. And so we've identified probably close to 400 different categories of professions and occupations and trades and industries that are impacted adversely by AB5 or have been impacted by AB5. And the stories just were pouring in. You can't even believe it, from all across the political spectrum. Our members are bipartisan, from far left liberals to far right conservatives and everything in between. We have it's a equal opportunity offender of lives and livelihoods. So there's a lot of people that have lost their livelihoods overnight, starting back in January when the law first took effect. Actually, starting back in December, people were starting to report losing their clients and their gigs. And so it's just been devastating for so many different types of people.
Well, our organization has been really fighting the Private Attorney General Act, and this is particular law, allows an attorney to step in and take the shoes of the Attorney General, and these lawsuits, start over anything and everything that's a labor code violation. And AB5 hit the radar screen, and we knew because of independent contractors, there would be a lot more of these lawsuits. I thought we could see a third of an uptick. So I follow a lot of these laws, and I looked at it. A lot of our members would say, well, we really don't have any independent contractors. Well, this is kind of a fight with Uber, and I don't really see any impact on it. And, once I started to look into it and dive into it a little bit, it was quite amazing how many professions there were that were affected by this. How many professions are there to be?
Well, I mean, it can be, there's so many professions within professions and trades and occupations.
100, 200, 300?
We've identified 400 different
400.
types of professions,
So anybody
within
out there
all the different
listening,
categories.
400 different occupations land into the independent contractor status. And I think most people don't know about that. Most people don't think about these things. And I know for a fact it wasn't thought about when the law was written. It was Lorena Gonzalez and her union buddies in a quest to organize and unionize Uber and Lyft. And by doing so, all the fallout becomes the other 400 occupations.
Well, I think that it's not unintended consequences. I think their ultimate goal has always been to capture as much of the independent workforce as they can, to go after those payroll taxes that they say they lose $7 billion a year from the independent workforce, and all other different reasons. And you mentioned PAGA, and I learned about PAGA through this journey of AB5 by going to your website and seeing the horror stories there. And it's just clear that Sacramento just keeps criminalizing businesses. And one of the big money makers for them with AB5 are these massive fines for misclassification violations. So a small business can be fined anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000 per violation. And they're not just going after Uber and Lyft, because I'm getting the private messages from people in my group who are small business owners, moms and pops, and even one person owned businesses who are getting audited right now for misclassification violations. And some of them are facing up to $200,000 in fines for, having a platform that connects referees and umpires with schools, for example, or having a platform that used an independent contractor videographer on occasion throughout the year. I mean, these people are the targets too, and it's not just Uber and Lyft. And the problem with AB5 is that the new language in it has empowered a whole posse of government enforcers to come after any business, large or small, in any town. And that would include district attorneys in any town of any size can go after any small business if they think that there's misclassification going on. So, the small businesses are really the targets.
The ones that get hurt. And what just astounded me was, you're reading about the budget. We've got this huge deficit. We've got COVID going on. People can't get their unemployment checks, but they actually earmarked $20 million to enforce anybody violating AB5. I mean, really, is this the time to do such a thing? It's unbelievable. I'm familiar with some of our members are trucking companies, and some of these trucking companies have had a business model forever. There are independent truck drivers who own their own truck and get paid mileage, but you can get caught into the trap of that if you happen to carry all the loads for one specific company or happen to wear their shirt. And I thought to myself, God, this is crazy. How much a semi costs? Somebody makes this kind of an investment, and 2 years later they say, well, I'm sorry, you need to be an employee now. That's
what happened. There's
zero
70
thought into this. Yeah.
There's 70,000 independent owner-operator truckers in California that this law affects, and they're not out of the woods yet, because they're waiting to hear back from the Ninth Circuit on that extension that they have. They have a temporary exemption from AB5, but they're not out of the woods yet. And I feel that their group, they were, if I can use the word, screwed over the most, I think, of any group, because California mandated that these independent truckers, and only these independent truckers, upgrade their trucks to meet this CARB emission standard.
Because of CARB.
Right. So they some of them invested up to $250,000 in their own trucks that they bought themselves. And a lot of these people are legal immigrants who come to California
Right.
and are entrepreneurial with their business. And then AB5 came. They invested this money to meet these regulations that Sacramento or imposed on them. And by the way, Nathan Fletcher, Lorena Gonzalez's husband, was on that board that mandated those standards. I just found that out. You can't make this stuff up, you know. And then they invest all this money into their own trucks to comply, and then AB5 comes along and attempts to pull the rug right out from under them. So they're in court. They've been battling, you know, and they have some federal interstate commerce considerations that would make it they're arguing unconstitutional for them to be you know, have to comply with AB5. So they're battling that out in court. And you know, I don't know how much your viewers know, but they might have heard the recent headlines that the cleanup bill AB 2257, which purports to give some exemptions, some new exemptions. Right. They've doled out some new exemptions to some winners. And still there's lots of losers left out of that equation, and there's lots of caveats and fine print in these exemptions. But the journalist exemption, for example, the journalists, the American Society of Journalists and Authors, are continuing with their lawsuit because there's still unconstitutional limitations and restrictions on their content, even in the cleanup bill.
Wasn't there a restriction
this isn't over
about how many articles you could write in a month and still stay as an independent? There was some kind of a crazy mechanism in there, and that's the problem. I think a lot of people don't understand when these laws are written. You know, they make them so complex. The only people that understand them are the attorneys, and I think even a lot of times the public doesn't even understand what this law is being passed.
Well, the attorneys don't even understand a lot of it because it's a lot. Some of it is drafted so poorly. And there are still a lot of questions that remain unanswered. One of them is franchisors, you know, because and I believe personally that the franchising industry is the next big target, right, that they're going to zoom in on. But it's not really clear in AB5, which is now AB 2257. They don't make it clear that a California-based company would be allowed to contract with an out-of-state independent contractor, which they are, you know. So this is what we're seeing in our group. A lot of people lost their contracts with their clients, and they turned around and replaced them with independent contractors from out of state. And the EDD did that, and the San Diego Board of Supervisors did that too. They went out of state to get independent contractors that they could work with.
That's unbelievable. That one's a new one. I haven't heard that one.
Oh yeah, it's just a constant. In my group, it's the outrage of the day. You can't even believe what you see coming through on a daily basis with this law.
So how has AB5 affected you personally?
Well, it affects me because of my mother, my family. My mother is in her 90s. And fortunately, she's doing fairly well, and we do have a daytime caregiver. But if I were, you know, and of course, as a writer, I have a dubious exemption now, but myself and family caregivers in particular were really hard hit by this law overnight. We have so many stories of people that were caring for their sick loved ones. You know, a woman with a husband who had stage 4 colon cancer, for example, who, you know, a woman who has a quadriplegic 38-year-old son. We have stay-at-home moms caring for their, you know, chronically ill children.
So how does the independent contractor law affect that? What's changed there?
Well, I mean, these people are able to stay at home and work remotely while caring for their loved ones. So you would have people who were virtual assistants, or people who were doing bookkeeping, or people that were doing tutoring, or translators, interpreters, writers, all these people that were able to work from home as an independent contractor and still take care of their loved one because they
Got
can't
it.
go out into the
Got it.
workforce.
Yeah.
So it was just so brutal and so cruel to read these stories of some of these people having to pack their sick loved one into a U-Haul and flee the state so that they could continue to earn a living while caring for their loved one at home.
Right.
And so, and AB5 is definitely just kills senior citizens who've been thriving with their self-employment opportunities up until now, you know, and so a senior, somebody in their late 50s, 60s, 70s, we have many examples of seniors who are transcriptionists who lost their client overnight, and they don't have any opportunities of being able to be hired into the traditional workforce because of their age, right. You know, and they were making, you know, great money. And so AB5 is very discriminatory, disproportionately to women, discriminately against seniors, against people who are chronically ill, who can't get out in the workforce but can work from home, you know, as a freelancer. It's just the stories that were coming into my group were just, it would break your heart, and you just think, this is what the state of California is doing to Californians.
Well, I think one of the most outrageous things I've seen this year is we have COVID. We know it's a problem, you know, and people are working remotely now because they're thinning out the workforce and they want, you know, less chance of transmission. And, you know, PAGA, a lot of these lawsuits are made up of people that take late lunches, or they claim they took their lunch late and missed breaks. So a senator tried passing a bill this year at the end of session where if you had an employee that was at home, working at home, they could file a PAGA lawsuit claiming they didn't get their lunch or their rest break on time, working from home. So the senator tries to get this as an exemption, and it didn't even get voted on. And labor was vehemently opposed to it and said, oh, you know, employers are taking advantage of employees, and they're going to take advantage of their employees working at home. And I'm thinking, what kind of crazy nonsense is this? Do we need to put time clocks at the employees' houses to make sure that they're taking their breaks and their lunches on time? And it just shows you.
Are they getting their sexual harassment training too? Do they have the poster up for the safety considerations at home? I mean, it's crazy.
What is your intention? You know, I mean, you want to unionize I mean, you want to turn. You're reversing, you know, this country. You're reversing this state. And I just find it preposterous, to be honest.
Well, they're trying to force an antiquated business model onto the workforce, and they're not moving ahead with the times, you know. And in the case of writers, we saw this with Lorena Gonzalez, who didn't understand the digital aspect, the fact that our skills cross over, that a lot of us writers do videography too, you know. So if we're reporting on a story and we're locally reporting on some, you know, city council meeting, and we want to post a video, we couldn't charge for that because it's a, you know, I mean, the whole thing is just nuts. And I have an example. When you mentioned the lockdown, Californians were very much discriminated against when everybody in the country was locked down. Some people across the country had lost their jobs permanently, so they decided to, you know, try to get some online work as transcribing or writing or tutoring or virtually assisting, you know. And so meanwhile, those opportunities were available to everybody else in every other state, but Californians were stuck on lockdown, not able to, they were turned down by virtue of the fact that they're in California. And I have an example of a 25-year-old who was caring for his grandmother and was stuck at home in lockdown, couldn't go out, had to have groceries delivered, and furthermore could not work from home because he was aced out of all of these opportunities online, from being a tutor to being a translator. And it was just, it's just outrageous. It's outrageous.
Well, it's just, you wonder, like, when are they going to legislation start to represent the people that elected them in office? You know, I look at labor unions make up about less than 15% of the total workforce. Half of those are federal employees. And they continually claim, you know, unions are needed. They have to protect the employee. They have to do this. They have to do that. You know, there's prison guards that work at Pelican Bay that'll do 12-hour shifts, no lunch, no break. If we did that as an employer, guess what would happen? We'd have a gigantic lawsuit. You know, the UC Davis system had the worst payroll system in the world. Employees were getting checks that were inaccurate. They were getting checks that were late. They were 2 weeks late when some of these payroll checks. What happens to them? Nothing. No PAGA lawsuit, nothing. So it's really, that's the most unfortunate part. And the more you make these laws complex, the more difficult it is to do business. And they just need to get rid of AB5 and be done with it. It's too complicated. Who's in it? Who's not in it? What's the, you know, what is the fine print? How am I supposed to know? And you've got people out of state that are specifically saying, I don't want to do business with California. Forget it. Why take a chance? I'll hire somebody out of Arizona to do this. Why even mess with this?
That's precisely what the employment law attorneys are telling us. You know, if you're a risk-averse business, you don't want to even touch a California freelancer, even if they're quote-unquote exempt, because they're radioactive. And just by virtue of issuing a 1099, that could put a flag on your business for an audit, even if you're in compliance with with AB5. You know, so people we have people that were exempt right off the top, like graphic designers. For whatever reason, they got an exemption, but we have examples in our group of graphic designers who lost their clients anyways.
Right, because they don't understand. You know, well, I don't know, I don't want to take a chance, forget it. You know, they're not, you know, are they going to change their mind again? What's going to happen here?
Look, the ambiguities in the law and the confusion with some of the language is designed to be that way, because the law, it defers to wanting people to convert to employees. That's the basic goal of AB5. And these exemptions that they grant people, you know, the whole way that they went about passing this law in the first place was very scorched earth. You know, they burned down the village. They're all of these people that got exemptions.
That's labor's mentality. I hate to say it.
They were put out of these people that finally got their exemption, then they should have been exempted from the top, like real estate appraisers. We have real estate appraisers in our group that lost their professions, their gigs, their clients. They were sending real estate appraisers from out of state to replace them. Notary publics. Who else got it? No, notaries didn't get an exemption, but who else? Oh, translators and interpreters finally got an exemption. They were fighting for it tooth and nail. You know, musicians, gigging musicians, the law was so that made it so that a band leader would have to make all of their band members, no matter if you just were sitting in with the band for a night, your employees. So they finally gave these people exemptions, but they destroyed their careers for an entire year.
Right. Turned everything upside down. Yeah. So tell me. Go ahead.
I'm just saying that they play around with people's lives like we're paper dolls in a dollhouse that they can move around at whim without regards for the real life consequences and what's happening on the ground with people's lives and livelihoods and careers and families, some of it life threatening. And they just operate in Sacramento on their own time schedule, and as though, you know, I mean, shoot first, ask questions later. It's so destructive. The law is so destructive. That's why I just keep fighting it, because it's the injustices of it. It's just un-American to me. It's unconstitutional.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about Prop 22. What's your stand on that? I mean, obviously, I think this had driven AB5 a lot, and Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash putting up a lot of money trying to get this exemption. Where do you stand on that? What's your thoughts?
Most of us in my group are voting yes on Prop 22 because it's we're free. I'm a freelancer against AB5, and so
Right.
if I were to vote no on Prop 22, I would be endorsing or legitimizing, or I would be endorsing the enforcement of AB5 onto an industry. And then it's an industry where 70% of the drivers want to remain independent contractors. So we're freelancers against AB5, and that includes rideshare drivers who want to remain independent. And if Prop 22 passes, it's going to really drive a stake in the heart of AB5 and really get the law to the point where it would be much easier to repeal altogether, because then
Right.
you've got it's already filled with holes with all these carve-outs and exemptions, but that would be like a stick of dynamite. And how can a law like that continue to exist when the main reason for it has been tossed aside? And they are offering 120% of minimum wage and access to health benefits and all
Right.
sorts of different things. So it's kind of a new way, I think, of a third way of classification almost, that where if we're going to save the gig economy, you're going to have to make some kinds of concessions with the business model, because the Prop 22 doesn't pass. There are so many people that are going to be out of work in a pandemic, and I'm
This is not the time. This is not the time to overregulate in any shape or fashion. I mean, this is just total insanity. I hope everybody votes yes on Prop 22, because, again, we need to take that wind out of that sail and somehow fight back and push back and say, wait a minute, why are the legislators so pro-union? How about being pro-independent contractor? How about being pro-business owner? And I think everybody throws business owners into the pot of Jeff Bezos and Amazon. Not everybody's Amazon. There are small businesses who are just dying right now and need all the help they can get, and you're throwing more rules and regulations on them, and it's really not fair. It's really not
and
fair
then
at
you
all.
see, if Prop 22 doesn't pass, then you're going to see these labor laws metastasize across the state. We're already seeing with the PRO Act, HR 2474, I believe
Right.
is the name of it, that addresses the real one aspect of labor law. And then just a couple weeks ago, the Senate side, that's with Patty Murray up in Washington. Is she in Washington or Oregon? I can't remember. Senator Patty Murray came out with this very deceptively named bill called the Worker Flexibility and Small Business.
Yeah, they always name it something that sounds wonderful, like, oh, this is really great. They disguise it almost, and then before you know it, you read the fine print, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, this is what I thought it was.
So both the PRO Act and that one, which addresses the Fair Labor Standards Act, the other side of the flank, I guess you would say, they're flanking in from either side to try to codify the ABC test, the onerous ABC test that nobody can pass in California. They're trying to codify it into federal law so that this will spread all over the nation. And that's just what they want. They want to squelch the independent workforce. They just do.
Right.
They don't want to see it continue to overtake the traditional workforce.
Right. What if you had the 1 minute drill? You could say anything you wanted, and legislators were listening right now. What would you tell them?
Don't dismiss our stories. I mean, they just ignore the stories of the real life people who are suffering at the hands of their very destructive legislation. They're so interested in ramming through these laws that they ignore the very real effects of small business and the ripple effects, how that ripple effects out onto everybody in many aspects of your life. And I think that they rely on the fact that there's so much confusion around the law. They get to hide behind Uber and Lyft as the villain. But a lot of Californians do not know the first thing about AB5. And we don't have a very interested media that dives deep into the big picture collateral damage of how AB5 is affecting a vast swath of professions. And now we have this other thing they can hide behind, which is their cleanup bill. And you even see them politicians saying, well, it's all fixed for freelancers. That's not a problem anymore.
Yes.
Well, it's not. The independent filmmaking industry is going to leave California. AB5 is decimating that industry. There was an article in the San Francisco Chronicle yesterday or the day before about how community theater is just being completely wiped out by AB5. So we're losing the arts because of this. Healthcare workers, independent healthcare workers in a pandemic, everybody from nurse anesthetists to forensic nurses to licensed marriage family counselors and optometrists and pharmacists. And it's not just about low wage workers. They hide behind that too. We have 6-figure earners in our group who've lost their professional careers that they've been thriving at overnight because of AB5, executive recruiters, a pharmacist in our group that has doctorate degrees who lost her career and is dead in the water, hasn't gotten it back yet, has gone the entire year without any income because of AB5. Yet they exempted licensed psychologists, but they can't exempt a licensed pharmacist. The law picks winners and losers. Lorena Gonzalez, the author of the law down in San Diego, District 80, she claims, well, all laws pick winners and losers. But this law is so arbitrary and it's so unfair to so many people. Event planning is, and now they get to hide behind COVID too. Well, event planning and music and everything and festivals are leaving because of COVID. No, these things were leaving. They were closing. Opera companies and community theaters and dance studios and all the rest were closing long before COVID even hit because of AB5. And I've talked to many directors of different playhouses and opera companies and things like that said they can eventually survive COVID, but they can't survive AB5. They can't survive it.
So what do you want to tell really quickly to your 18,000 members, your fans?
19,000.
19,000, I'm sorry.
Well, we just got to keep fighting because it's not going to disappear overnight. To get a repeal on the ballot, we wouldn't be able to do that until 2022, the next statewide election.
Right.
So there's some people that are upset. How come Uber didn't include all freelancers and repeal AB5? Well, they didn't, but we can't go for a full repeal until 2022 if we were to take it to the voters, right? But if Prop 22 were to lose, that would be a setback for that, frankly. And I think a lot of people are seeing more of the same, projecting more of the same with the legislature, picking winners and losers, putting bills out there, that might help this group or that group and try to slowly pick away at it. But the fact of the matter is because of the PAGA laws, because of AB5, because of some of these other potential propositions that can put small businesses out of business, like in my opinion, Prop 15, if you're raising taxes on, and this is just my opinion, seems to me, if you're raising taxes on commercial property owners, they're going to pass it on to the people that are small renting. Business tax. And this is not what we need in California when small businesses are getting hammered. So in order for us to rise,
more regulations, more taxes, that'll solve everything.
No, Sacramento might as well just, escort all of these business owners to this state line and just say bye, because that's what they're doing. People are leaving in droves.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
really, it's not the California that I grew have. I mean, California is supposed to be the golden state of opportunity and entrepreneurship and
absolutely.
creativity and the emergence of cottage industries and land of the free, you know. And in the last 10 years, particularly beginning with PAGA, I think we've just seen this massive decline in 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 the ability to be entrepreneurial in the state and innovative. And I think that, you know, as somebody like a Steve Jobs, for example, would he be starting Apple Computer in his garage in California?
No, I actually wrote an op-ed on that, and the problem was he started it in his garage, and all the different rules and regulations, and we know that they worked longer than probably 5 hours without taking their lunch, and worked more than 10 without waiving their second lunch and taking their third break, and longer than 12 without taking their second lunch, and probably weren't paying themselves correctly, and the bathroom and the garage, I mean, they didn't even have a bathroom in the garage, but restrooms and break areas got to be 68 degrees or warmer, or that's a labor law violation. I mean, it's just total insanity. Total
It's all
insanity.
these plaintiff attorneys are just,
Oh, and they're getting rich. They're getting rich off of it.
it's like a candy store for them. It
Yeah,
doesn't, they can
absolutely.
just, and with AB5 now, that's going to even accelerate these frivolous lawsuits and these shakedowns and these audits that shouldn't be taking place on small businesses that are just trying to make a living, and all the rules and regulations that, I mean, the hoops that they make, just the average Californian have to jump through just to make a living.
Crazy.
It's crazy. They're criminalizing small businesses who are definitely impact. And by the way, I'm not seeing a whole heck of a lot from local chambers of commerce defending small businesses against AB5.
Right.
And I don't know what's going on with that, because I used to work with a Chamber of Commerce, Santa Ana Chamber of Commerce. I was a managing editor of a 38-page business and community journal that had a circulation of 60,000.
Wow.
And I did that for 7 years. And the Santa Ana Chamber of Commerce at that time was very proactive with all sorts of empowerment initiatives and things like that. And I'm just not seeing that kind of activity from chambers. I just not. I don't understand it. I just don't.
I think, unfortunately, a lot of groups, a lot of individuals have really taken the path that complacency. It could have been worse. We negotiated this. I mean, it's bad, but it could have been worse, and kind of almost a defeatist attitude. And I'll tell you this much, just so you know, I have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for you, Karen. I mean, you came out of nowhere, and I mean, you got this 19,000 member group going, and you're fighting so hard. And I mean, we need more Karens in this world that are doing what you're doing. And I am honored to have you on our show, and I appreciate everything you're doing. And
Well, Tom, I didn't know anything. I didn't even know
on things. Yeah.
I didn't even know the difference between an assembly person and a state senator. I didn't even know who voted for AB5. I didn't know it was voted down party lines. I knew nothing about Sacramento. I was like, I wasn't even paying attention to that, because it's a lot of noise.
That's what happens. And all these laws get passed, and people don't know. That's what happens.
Well, I'm learning all of this stuff as I go along because I read the, I want to be informed. I do all the webinars. I read every post that comes through, and the more you see, the more outrage you get. You just can't believe it's gotten to this point in California. And this is my state. I am proud to be a Californian. I was born and raised in California. And to see it being just dragged down to the abyss by these lawmakers who get away with it because they have a super majority up there.
Right.
It's just so disheartening. And as I mentioned before, our group is bipartisan. They try to, some of these proponents of AB5 try to to tar us as far right extremists or whatever. But they know we're not. They know that we're comprised of all sort. The entire political spectrum is who knows about this law is against this law. They just are. We have just as many Democrats in the group as we have everybody, non-party preference. Everybody under the sun is united against this law because it's so onerous and so tyrannical.
Well, to all the 19,000 members, I hope you're watching my show, but I appreciate you supporting Karen. I think she's doing a wonderful job. And how would somebody reach out to you, Karen?
All they have to do is come onto the page on free. It's public. It's public. It's called Freelancers Against AB5. Just come on board, join, and just read it and weep every single day. You can't believe it, But things are a little, with the election. There's going to be a lot of unanswered questions that are going to be answered soon about where we go next with this. But I want to thank you personally for everything that you've done to support our freelancer movement. From the full page ads that you ran that were just a mega hit. I mean, talk about hitting it out of the park with those 2 full page ads. We were just cheering. We couldn't believe it when we saw it. And of course, then the commercial that ran, at the first debate I can't tell you how much it means to me. And I speak on behalf of a lot of the freelancers in our group that you have come and kind of taken a real strong interest in the plight of the freelancer and the small business owner.
Whatever we can do to help, and let's keep fighting. We'll keep fighting together. And thanks for everything you do, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom.